And the last section is all construction. And so all the construction ones are like low sill, filtered light. Like there's one called half-inch trim, and it describes in detail why trim should be half-inch. It's like 1-inch trim, huge, gross, yucky. Quarter-inch trim, so small, so shitty. It's actually like has to do with like, the size of your fingers. It's a whole thing, right?
Oh, man. I mean, that's one of my favorite fun facts is bricks universally around the world, invented by all kinds of different cultures, and they're all
big as your hand,
almost exactly the same size and dimension, because it's like, well, you want it to be twice as long as it is wide so you can make corners out of it, and you want it to be the size of a human hand to be able to pick up, and it's like, of course. I mean, it is just cool to think about how much of the stuff around us just relates to the physical human body.
Absolutely. Let's just get into it. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Lucky Paper Radio.
Thought you forgot the name there for a second.
No, my name's Andy, and I'm here as always with my co-host, winner of the trophy for traveling the furthest to Inland Northwest Cube Fest. I didn't say your name, Anthony, first. Anthony Maddox. I should have said Anthony before the nickname. I screwed it all up.
That's okay. I narrowly beat you out by an undisclosed amount of distance.
Yes, no OPSEC shall be had here. Some number that is easier to measure in yards than miles. Let's put it that way.
We were jointly awarded the trophy for furthest traveled, which is a cool rock attached to a great little 3D printed stand that DSB made.
Them Idaho boys, I think, made some great trophies.
They really
just like
they know how to do it.
Thin little slivers of. Is yours sedimentary?
Nice
They're all
rocks.
Sedimentary, right? Yours is definitely sedimentary. Are the other ones sedimentary?
You're going to make me look like a fool on the internet here. I would guess they're metamorphic. It's like agate, most of them. Mine looks like something more like sandstony, but...
Anyway, these beautiful little thin cross-section slivers of rocks that are like, I don't know, they were anywhere from like 3 to 6 inches tall, just mounted.
It's very good.
I don't know. It's beautiful. And I mean, obviously, I think the rocks are from the Inland Northwest, so it's like an appropriate trophy.
From Graveyard Point.
Yeah. So I think it's a super cool trophy. And you were some number of hundreds of yards further further east, rather.
East.
From Spokane, Washington. So you got awarded the trophy.
Wow. Now it'll sit next to all my other Cube trophies. It's the only one I got.
You got to have some drafts of the Saltbox trophy you made, like some
I don't
leftover
actually.
pieces.
No, I got a couple little greebles in my box, but that was pretty much just a one and done.
Greebles is the vocabulary word of the day.
I love the word greebles. I wish
It's
I had
a good word.
more opportunities to use the word greebles.
It is a very good word. This is our recap episode for the Inland Northwest Cube Fest, the small cube event in Spokane, Washington we just returned from. But now, since we have an editor, we're recording these some number of time in advance, so this will come out later. Basically, like there's a longer distance now between us recording and you hearing this. But at the time of recording, we've been back for 5 days from the Inland Northwest Cube Fest. And wanted to review the event because it sounds like people generally think these episodes are kind of interesting.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, like all these Cube events of similar scope, this was a ton of fun. It was a little bit further to travel for, but the flip side of that is we got to see a bunch of people that we don't normally see that aren't going to make it out to the East Coast.
Yeah, it's our chance to see our West Coast buds, and the Washington Cube Champs was on my spouse's birthday this year, so that was right out. And the other option would be California Cube Champs, Joe's event, which the dates are later on this year, so this one came up first, and we decided to attend the Spokane event, organized by Jane. And it was truly great. We'll get into all the details of the event. First, I want to start with the pre-event draft, because we did a stone soup draft.
Should we go into detail in this, though? Because we're going to talk about this in a future episode.
I think we should just share our experience, but we will go into this in more detail with DSB in the future. But this is a draft format that DSB will be quick to say he did not invent. He does not want any credit, no authorship credit here, but he did name it as far as I can tell and spread it. So I don't know how you want to count that, listener at home. But it's just a draft format where you have each player show up with 45 45 cards of their choosing.
Very specifically curated. Maybe our listeners might be familiar with the concept of curating a set of cards to draft from.
Yeah, but doing it for just 45 cards, and then those cards are all in mismatched sleeves, shuffled together, and just drafted as if they were a cube.
To be clear, they're all, for each player that's contributing a pile, the same sleeves, so you can then unshuffle them and hand them back at the end of the night.
Yeah, you ideally have 8 unique sleeves. I think we had one overlap here in this particular draft of people using the same sleeves.
But your deck, including all the basics, just looks crazy. It's in all kinds of different sleeves, and you just don't worry too much about what's in what sleeve. Was that an issue for you at all?
No, it didn't come up for me at all. I'm sure we'll talk more about that and those kind of details in our Stone Soup draft episode, which is forthcoming, but not for a bit, because DSB's got stuff going on. Family man, got to find time in his busy schedule. I'll just briefly say that I had been curating a Stone Soup pile on my desk for months. This plan was in the works for a long time. I had been going through my binders and my chaff and just pulling cards I thought would be interesting for this particular format. And then I lost them the night before the draft, basically.
No.
Or like the week before the draft. I did eventually find them again.
Where were they?
Well, here's what I thought. I was sure I had sleeved them in a particular color of sleeve because this is the color of sleeves I was planning on bringing with me, and I thought I was sleeving them as I went. And it turns out I had not done that. So I was looking feverishly for a stack of cards
but they were
in these teal sleeves, but I actually just thrown out all my old teal sleeves, and so there were none, and they were just in a box with other cards in regular perfect cards. But I lost it before the draft, so I basically pulled 45 cards almost exclusively from the Degenerate Microcube, which I just took apart. I just went through there and was like, bip, 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 I guess I'm pulling this. Again, we'll talk more about this draft in detail. I just want to say that the small highlight of my draft was that I included in my 45 cards a full Stifle Knot package. I had Dreadnought, Dress Down, Stifle, and I think one other. I think I also included Doorkeeper Thrall, one of these other creatures that stops creature ETBs. And I was like, this is a dumb thing. I love Phyrexian Dreadnought more than almost any other card. We'll see if anybody can do anything with this. And then I drafted it, and I got to do it with my deck, which was kind of fun. More on that to come in the future.
Were there multiple Dreadnoughts in this draft?
No.
Okay. But there was another card that I put in that you were unsure of if it worked.
For
what was that
a second,
card?
I thought Mystic Reflection. I think I'm getting that card right.
That's the word.
For a second, I was like, oh my gosh, can Mystic Reflection turn all my creatures into Phyrexian Dreadnoughts?
But it doesn't have them enter...
They enter as copies, so they still have the ETB and have to be sacrificed. You know, I thought it would say like...
So what it does do is if you already had one in play, it says the next time one or more creatures enter this turn, they enter as copies. So if you could cast Raise the Alarm after casting this when you already had...
as copies.
Right. So Dreadnought, if you have two enter the battlefield at the same time, you tell one of them to sacrifice itself and the other one to sacrifice that other one as well. It's a weird quirk.
You're okay. I see what you're
saying. And you would already have to have one Dreadnought in play, but these are all instants.
It's an instant.
So you do that to
the point
trigger.
Is you can respond to the trigger, which is what I was thinking.
It would be very silly, but it is possible if you had some other cards to work with it.
I thought what I could do when I first read it, my eyes lit up because I thought I could respond to the trigger, then just let the Phyrexian Dreadnought die and the spell resolve,
and
then all future creatures
already in play.
All future creatures would just be Dreadnoughts.
Yeah.
And that's actually how it worked. But they are Dreadnoughts with the end of the battlefield.
They have the trigger, sure.
So they just have to be sacrificed. Anyway, I thought it'd be very cool if some other way to sort of make that combo happen turned out, and it didn't. But I got to do it.
Also need Altar of Dementia at the same time. Just turbo mill out your opponent.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil too much about this deck because we are going to talk about this more in detail with TSB, but that is sort of the brief highlight for me.
I had a lot of fun with this as well. Like the draft felt way more cohesive than you might think. And I think that part of that is like we had a bunch of cube people that were trying to curate things. My strategy building, my pool was like just lots of cheap stuff that makes sense. I will be honest that it was Friday night. I knew we had a long weekend of Magic, and so I was very open to just playing green-white, which I'm very comfortable with, and first picked a Baneslayer Angel and was like, all right, I'm going to stick to white at least.
More on that to come, because that was actually, I think, a lot more fun and had a lot fewer of the like perhaps seeming pitfalls that people might expect for that particular format. I really enjoyed it. So we're going to talk about that with DSB on a future episode upcoming. Then we get to the main event, Anthony, and you and I both went essentially full random. We had both ignored cubes we had played before, basically.
Yeah, I just excluded the Ornithopter cube, and I will be honest, for the last slot... Look, I just wanted to give everybody else a fair chance. For the last slot, I did put my thumb on the scale a little bit, but for the first three, I was full random with that exception.
Yeah, I did exactly the same thing, actually. So we got assigned the same cube in the first draft, which is Joe Donkey's alternate timeline cube. We'll link this in the show notes, of course, and... the name, I think, is a little maybe confusing for this because people think it's going to be something weird, maybe like, you know, what if the colors had different strengths and weaknesses or whatever, but it truly just is what if Magic evolved to never have Planeswalkers, never have modal double face cards, never have a lot of sort of the more complicated, funky things that Magic cards do these days. And so, in effect, it plays, I think, a lot like a regular cube or a Sacred Geometry or like one of these cubes that is kind of focused on Magic's bread and butter fundamentals.
Yeah, very similar. It's like, what if Magic developed differently in the way that was exactly Joe's taste in Magic?
In the way that I like.
Which is, you know, what a lot of cubes are. So, yeah, I think that's not necessarily something that needs to be stated, but
yeah,
I think it's a good name.
I don't mind the name, but I think people might have a different idea of what it is when they hear
Fair.
alternate timeline, when it is, you know, one of these, I think, just pretty clean bread and butter cubes that are my favorite cubes to play, honestly, especially at events like this. I was thrilled to be dropped into this for my first draft. I will spoil the results. I did end up going 3-0 in this draft, and I ousted you in the finals. We met in the finals of the first draft.
It's a rough way to get knocked out on my first chance for a pin.
Do you want to actually review your deck first and at least talk about the highlights of the draft for you?
Sure. I'm trying to remember even what I first picked, or how did I get into this deck?
Oh, you didn't take a draft pick order
I did not.
photo?
No, I do not have that
Shocking.
ability. I ended up in basically blue-black with a light red splash for Johira, Weatherlight Captain, and also a Flame Slash, and was trying to do sort of artifact stuff. I got a really late Traxos, which I was very grateful for, kind of made the deck work, actually have a really powerful win condition. In my first round, I played against Heather, who was actually the other person who simultaneously did the same shuffling research that I did, and kind of motivated me to dust off some half-written article that I had just sitting for years.
There were a lot of jokes about this being the table most equipped to shuffle a cube out of any table of human beings on planet Earth.
It was definitely that. So the cube was well shuffled, so I can't blame my loss on any weird packs. Great to finally meet her. That was actually just a really fun match because I could tell by the way that she was playing. I was I sense a wrath coming very soon. So I was trying
Your
to
spidey
figure
senses
out
were tingling.
how do I not overcommit to the board and maximize value. And then both in that game and out of the sideboard, I had a lot of ways to do that. So it's just overall a really fun needle to try and thread there. Played against Nate in round 2, who was playing a pretty aggressive red-white deck, and also had some rough mulligans. I think they went to 5, at least in one of our games. Beat them in 3 games. That was, again, a really fun, sort of narrow match. Even in the games where they mulliganed very heavily, they were still pretty close. And it was similarly threading the needle. This is really my kind of cube where I have the most fun. How are your first 2 matches before we get to the dramatic finals?
I'll be honest, my deck ran like a well-oiled machine, and the games were not close.
Yeah.
I kind of stomped my opponents, frankly. My draft, pack 1, pick 1 to Young Pyromancer, into Watery Grave, into Infernal Grasp, and then I got a 4th pick Lightning Bolt, and I was like, I do believe that means I'm doing it. Followed by Grim Lavamancer, too. So my first 5 picks for the power level of this cube felt very good. I will say I wasn't 100% confident in my deck before I played any matches because I actually really only had 3 win conditions, and I'm not a control deck. I'm a tempo deck, but I have Dark Confidant, Young Pyromancer, Grim Lavamancer, a couple random 1-drop fairies, I had Siren Storm Tamer and Fairy Seer, and then I had a Battlewing Mystic, and those were my ways to deal combat damage to my opponent. A couple burn spells. I did have a control magic to maybe steal their big threat in a game or 2, but I was a little worried that I ended up threat light, and my deck might not function or might stumble a little bit. And could have been luck. Could have been that maybe I'm just wrong and I'm not threat light, but the deck kind of ran like a well-oiled machine. One of the highlights for me was the first match I played of this particular draft, though, where I was playing a nice middle-aged woman named Ariel, who I talked to after the matches, and she said, asked her how she got into Magic, and she was like, well, during COVID, my son got really kind of depressed and down on himself and was kind of isolated indoors and couldn't
I can relate.
Yeah, and couldn't get motivated to go out and do anything. And I heard about Magic, and so I taught myself to play so I could play with him and get him into the game. And now we go to these events all the time. And her son was not there; she just came out alone because now she's really into Magic too. But just the sweetest imaginable story of a mom who learned Magic to help her son, which I was eyes welling up as she was just telling me why she got into the game, which is, I think a testament to events like this, right? I talked to Ariel throughout the weekend, and I know that she had a great time and said it was the best event she's been to. And these are the kind of events where people like this can all come together and, play Magic for fun, basically. And that was definitely a highlight of the whole weekend for me, was playing against Ariel and hearing that story.
Definitely. It's just such a different vibe from any other Cube event that attracts just really unique group of players.
And if you're listening, Ariel, I'm sorry my deck was broken. But
it was. I felt like I didn't have a chance, and I had a kind of frustrating couple turns against you where you had Young Pyromancer, I had a way to kill it, and then I had Reanimate and was like, ooh, do I want to reanimate your Young Pyromancer this turn? I don't think so. It's going to be much less mana efficient. Maybe I'll do that in the turn after. And then you unearthed it the next turn, and I was brutal. I didn't realize how important it was for me to get that out of your graveyard.
Yeah, Unearth ended up being essential because I did have so few win conditions, but Unearth was a great way to buy them back,
Definitely.
Obviously. The deck was, I think, very high in terms of the individual card quality. I do still think if I could have my perfect version of this deck, I would have a couple more threats and a few less, kind of dinky interactive spells. I was main decking an Unsubstantiate, which is fine, but not a premier card that I'm super happy to main deck. So I would have traded a couple of those for more threats, but...
it played really well. If somebody's first play of the game is turn 3 or turn 4 and you're unsubstantiating it and making more 1/1s, that was a commanding start.
Yeah, I had a couple of bounce spells, and they all played really well in my deck, because I very often had either a Dark Confidant, which meant that I could afford the sort of card disadvantage of playing a bounce spell in order for tempo, because I was gaining card advantage turn over turn, or I had Young Pyromancer, in which case I was getting, card advantage in the form of creatures in play by casting bounce spells, so I was able to recoup that pretty effectively. And yeah, our games weren't particularly close either. I think I just had good opening hands and led on a threat, backed it up with counter magic and removal spells, and in the one case, an Unearth to bring back my powerful threat. Young Pyromancer by far was the standout. And I remember talking to Joe afterwards, and he was like, I didn't know if Young Pyromancer was any good here. Everyone tells me it's no good. And I was like, no, it's cracked.
Don't listen to everyone.
Like, I made 7 or 8 tokens with it in multiple games. It was really kind of messed up, which I think is honestly just a testament to like different types of playgroups, right?
Definitely, yeah.
I get the sense that the Idaho playgroup is very different from our playgroup in a lot of ways, which may sound like I'm throwing some weird shade. I'm absolutely not. I think they sound more fun than us in most ways, but I also know that like they're oftentimes playing more than 40 cards and like, maybe more willing to try an experimental archetype or something, whereas our playgroup is very friendly, but also like skilled players that are all basically trying to win. Like that's the sort of
much less likely to go rock hounding after a draft or do other fun activities.
The social contract of our draft nights is that we're all there to try and play the game and win, and that's what makes it fun for us. So that was our first draft of the weekend. And I gotta say, I was really thrilled to get a pin just because I love this pin. I think Jane did a beautiful job with the logo, and I also wanted one desperately and didn't want to have that hanging over me the whole weekend, so to get it out of the way felt good.
I can confirm, having it hang over you the whole weekend feels bad.
Oh, no.
I also really wanted that pin.
Well, you did a lot better in the second draft than I did, so let's go there. We once again, we're in the same cube. This time we were playing Nadia's The Citadel, which is a Grixis Desert Cube. Desert cubes are, once again, cubes where you must draft all of your lands. So there is no basic land box you have access to at the end of the draft. If memory serves, I believe the Citadel was 3 packs of 18.
That sounds right.
So you get to draft more cards, but you do have to also draft every single land you end up playing, which is definitely a different vibe if you've never done that before, to a normal draft.
Have you drafted a Desert Cube before?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I've played a couple of Bones' Desert Cubes before, as well as... one or two. I've played Amonkar multiple times.
Okay.
I've definitely drafted other Desert Cubes, and now it's escaped me which ones.
Name a Desert Cube! Name a Desert Cube!
Any?
Yes!
Oh my god.
Yes.
This is so hard.
Dang. Was there a Desert Cube at Saltbox?
I don't think so. I've drafted a number of like what people have been calling
drafted the Giver Cube.
Semi-desert cubes, yeah. So things like the Giver Cube or do you even have access to...
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's a regular Desert Cube,
So that's a Desert Cube I've definitely drafted a couple times. The Devoid Cube and other things where it's like, okay, you have access to just wastes, or Parker's Cube where we have access to just swamps. I haven't drafted a pure Desert Cube that often, so I was definitely... not nervous going into it, but it was definitely something that was front of mind. It's like, how highly do I need to take fixing, and how difficult is it going to be to get the good fixing? And I shouldn't even say fixing, just like lands. I needed to draft basic island and basic mountain and basic swamp very highly.
Yeah, it's really fun to see basic lands in a pack in a Desert Cube, honestly, because it reminds me a little bit of when we got really into Commander. I remember, the sort of arc that a lot of Commander players follow is their first couple decks are precons or kitchen table decks where they have a lot of basic lands. And then they realize non-basic lands are so good. And then they pile a bunch of non-basic lands in their mana bases. And then when you play a lot, you realize actually, what's really good
I really need to find some more basic lands.
What's really good is untapped colored mana sources with no downside. That's actually pretty good. And I feel like the same sort of experience happens in a Desert Cube where you realize actually, if I don't get them for free, Island is a very high pick. That's a very important card in your blue deck. And so you start to reevaluate things differently, which is a fun sort of context shift.
Especially when you have an Ash Barrens and a Prismatic Vista, and you're like, well, I really, really need at least one of each.
I kept an opening hand in one of, I think it was a match against you, honestly, where I had one Oliphant in my deck, which has Mountain Cycling for generic mana.
You were mad. And then you ended up casting the Oliphant. Twice.
It didn't matter. But I kept Oliphant in my opening hand along with a couple other lands, and then on turn 1, I was on the draw, and I drew my one and only mountain. And I was like, oh, great, cool. Now this is no longer a land. I hope I don't continue to draw non-land spells and not be able to cast things because I thought one of these lands in my hand would be a land, and it turns out it's not. I'll go first this time. My draft went kind of sideways, which is to say, I kind of came into this with an expectation that there's a lot of Magic's color pie that is covered by Grixis, right? You've got hard control, you've got very aggressive decks, you've got tempo decks. I kind of suspected that maybe mid-range wouldn't really so much be a thing. You wouldn't be able to just kind of play good cards and get away with it. You kind of needed to have some side of that tempo axis you were trying to favor. And I wanted to favor the controlling side of that axis. And I thought if I got enough sort of cheap removal and card advantage that I'd be able to sort of grind out long games. And I think it just wasn't open at my seat, honestly. I wheeled some cards and got some cards late that were surprising. I got a very late Treasure Cruise in Pack 3, which I was very excited about. I should say, too, the Citadel breaks Singleton for a number of spells, mostly 1-drops, I believe. So I had both copies of Inquisition of Kozilek, both copies of Thoughtseize, and then I had like one board wipe in Toxic Deluge. I did get Kess eventually, which was, I think, one of the better cards in my deck, as well as Liliana the Last Hope, one of the few Planeswalkers. My first pick was a Murktide Regent, which I thought would just be a really powerful threat. But ultimately, my deck did not really have a cohesive strategy. I'm playing these like cheap discard spells, but I have no way to apply early pressure. I've got a Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is just there to flashback those 4 spells and occasionally a Tarfire.
I mean, that seems pretty good.
If you get to do it, but I didn't. I don't believe I did. And also just like having a random 2-drop in your deck that otherwise is not playing to the board early means that they're likely to have removal spells or, blockers for it, so it's not as good as it would be in a deck where you're applying pressure otherwise. And yeah, I ended up going 1-2. I played you again in round 3, so I know you went 2-1 because you beat me in that round. Just felt like my deck was not focused enough. Something I really liked about this cube, though, for sure, is there were tons of modal double-faced lands, specifically. Like, lots of cards that were lands on the back, spells on the front. One's from the original Zendikar set, one's from the Modern Horizons set that included them. And I also had a couple ways to pick up my own lands. And so it was fun that I had, like, tons of modal spells in my deck. Among my lands, let me see here. I had 1, 2, 3, 4... 5, 6 of my lands were MDFCs, so they, could be spells if I needed them to be spells. And actually, one of the things I ran into is I had a single basic land. It was only 1 swamp. I had one.
You had 1 basic.
Yeah, the rest of my lands were all non-basic, and honestly, they basically all come into play tapped. Like I was playing Mystic Sanctuary in a deck with only 2 islands because I just needed a blue source, so that's just an awful island. I would have much rather had an island, but instead I was playing Mystic Sanctuary. All my mana came into play tapped, and especially in the games against you, I felt like I was constantly 1 turn behind the interaction I needed to sort of hang, and that was because my mana base I drafted. I was not prioritizing basic lands that highly. I was prioritizing lands, but I wanted to be all 3 colors. I kind of decided from early in the draft, so I prioritized fixing lands, which in this cube were mostly tapped, and just couldn't hang with what your deck was doing.
Do you feel like the fact that you are already sort of dividing your attention between like drafting cards you thought were good and the mana base, that made it harder to stay focused within the strategy of the deck?
Maybe. I really just think that I was not the right seat. I should have been doing something else in my seat. Maybe been more aggressive or something. Like I saw in round 2, I played an opponent that had I won round 1, and then in round 2, I played an opponent that had a like really, really strong red-black discard deck where like every single card in their deck was synergistic. It either discarded cards, or it had madness, or it otherwise rewarded you discarding cards, like every single spell, literally in their whole deck. And I was just like, yeah, my deck is not close to this. Like, I'm just kind of cobbling together some okay spells, but there's not really any synergies that I'm pursuing, and I don't even really have a cohesive strategy in terms of, like, what I'm trying to do, other than, like, go to the late game, draw Kess, and profit, hopefully, is, like, what I was aiming to do, basically. Maybe I was not open enough to the idea of synergy and a sort of more focused game plan, but, yeah, this deck just didn't work, which is fine.
I mean, you still went 2-1, right? Or it was 1-2?
I went 1-2 because I lost to you in round 3.
Okay, you're right. The deck didn't work. Sorry about that. So I started on Snapcaster Mage, got some pretty efficient removal early, a Talryn the Sky Summoner, and I saw a Rise from the Tides. I'm pretty sure this was in pack 1 that I was hoping would wheel and did. So I tried to commit pretty early to like a blue-red spells deck. So I was looking especially for a bunch of removal that would draw me a card, which there's a fair amount of at like 3 mana.
Removal that draws you cards?
In a way. What do we have? We got a Ill-Timed Explosion, which is either a card draw or it's a Wrath. Okay, maybe not exactly. Slick Sequence, that's removal that draws you a card. That was a card I was excited about.
I was about to say, removal that draws you a card is kind of rare because it's cracked.
And I was looking for it.
Yeah, I bet you were.
I just wanted to like be keeping my opponent's board in check while filling up my graveyard with spells. I did have a light black splash for Wandering Death, which is just a regrow 2 creatures, but also it's just a thing you can cycle and put more things in the graveyard. Also a Takanuma, which again is like a cool way to have a little black splash because I can maybe buy back a threat if I need it, or it's just a black source.
And you might have just drafted that as a land.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily
even
caring
just thinking
about
of it as a wastes would have been relevant. I did end up pretty good in terms of basics. I had 8 basics in total, and I think I ended up with maybe 2 lands unplayed in the sideboard. Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, that gives all your instant sorceries in the graveyard. Gives them all flashback, was also a very powerful card in this deck. The one thing that was a little bit clunky about this is I also, in Pack 3, opened Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh, which is just a 7-mana ridiculous planeswalker. If it's not clear from the vibes, there's a little bit of a Nicol Bolas theme in this cube.
It's a Bolas flavor.
And I was just like, can I just play the 7-drop in my otherwise deck that's trying to do something very different and sometimes just win? And the answer is yes. This card was kind of silly.
I had the 8-mana Bolas Planeswalker, but I did not
play. Which was
play.
in the same pack, funnily enough. I opened both of those, and I was like, are these good? Am I supposed to be playing these?
I probably should have just jammed that one, because honestly, most of the games I won by either cast, which happened a couple times, but more often I just got to the late game with removal, and I played hard cast Mirror Shell Crab or Oliphant, and was like, I have a big creature now. Is that good enough? And it was in a couple games.
Great.
So I should have just done the same thing with a big Planeswalker, probably.
Probably, yeah. So I played Joe round 1. New Joe. Never met this Joe before. He was a delightful opponent.
New Joe just dropped.
Had me really on the ropes in our first game. I was at 1 life for many, many turns, but then managed to stabilize with Nicol Bolas and really heavy controlling the board, and really fun to kind of navigate that and figure out how do I survive against every random 1/1 that he can make, especially with some token generators. Round 2, I played against Nadia, the creator of the cube, who soundly crushed me, so that's pretty cringe, but okay. Hope you had fun doing that, Nadia.
Anthony said it, not me.
No, Nadia's great. She had just a really great control deck, lots of counter spells, and I had slow enough draws that I wasn't able to get underneath the counter spells, and so we did a lot of just staring at each other, and then I thought maybe I was going to turn the corner again, finding an opportunity to cast Nicol Bolas, but Nicol Bolas got destroyed. That was sad. And then played against you in round 3.
And beat me.
I was not feeling good about the match, which I shouldn't
said
have
multiple
said
times
because you got very salty about that.
I was not very salty. I just think it's a bad thing to say because then
you're right. It is.
Because then you're going to win, and then
but
it's
I know
going to feel bad.
you can take it.
Yeah, everyone assumes I can take it. This is part of the problem.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, it was fun.
I did mulligan a couple times, but I think if we played 12 matches, you would win 9 to 10 of them probably. I just think your deck was better than mine.
I think it really depends. I mean, we had that one game where you just Thoughtseize me 3 times, and it's well, I'm done. I can't really do anything from here, and I feel especially
you won that game.
Are you serious?
Yes, you beat me in 2.
That is not true.
Is it not true?
I copied the records down from Hedron Network. You got me 1 game.
Oh, I don't remember that game, I guess. Huh.
See, we're having some kind of memory issue.
We're old.
Yeah.
This is an old guys podcast.
2 old guys talking about Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh. And that was the Citadel.
And that was the end of our drafts for the day because Jane correctly is running this as a 2 draft a day event. There was open drafting for people that wanted to play.
For the sickos.
There was open drafting for the sickos. You gotta throw the sickos a bone. But people that wanted to play a 3rd draft could play their own cubes they brought, and I'm sure plenty of people stuck around and did that.
Yeah, there was I think also a little library of other cubes that were available.
Yeah, and we did not. We instead went and swam in a beautiful river, and it was absolutely dreamy. We went there around twilight, swam. There was big rocks, cold water.
Beautiful rocks.
It was the best.
If you like columnar basalt, check out
Spokane,
Washington.
Wait, I don't even know what river that is. I should probably look it up. But the Spokane River? Probably not. Whatever river that was. We were swimming in it, and it was great. On to day 2. My first draft of the day was the Ball Pit. This is the cube I was probably most excited about and also scared of because
it's a scary cube.
It is a radical context shift. It is Jane's newish cube. I think she's had it for 6 months now, probably. And the shtick of the cube is that you can play any card face down as a copy of Chromatic Sphere. Hence the name of the Ball Pit, because of all the Chromatic Spheres, all the balls everywhere. There are 2 other rules modifications here. I guess it's kind of one rules modification, which is that you draft 4 packs of 15 instead of 3. And then there is no deck building phase. So this is essentially also a desert cube. You have to draft your basics, and you also have to play every single card you draft. You just shuffle up your draft pool and start playing, which would not work in almost any other cube, except here if it's a card you don't want to cast because it's off color or because it's just not part of your strategy, you can just play it face down as a sphere, obviously. And so that sort of rules modification allows for that simplification, which I think is actually really nice because the draft took a long time, and I think our pod actually drafted it the fastest of any of the pods of the weekend. I know some other pods were really dragging their feet trying to read all the cards and jump through these hoops of context shifts. And then once you get to the end, you don't have to do a deck building though. You just get to shuffle up and go, which is nice.
And it's, did you say 60 card decks, right?
Yeah, 60 cards, which I actually talked to Jane about this, and she made that choice because she didn't want people to have to worry about decking. And with all the spheres, you're obviously drawing more cards than you would in the average game of Magic. I think decking was a likely thing to happen, but she just didn't want people to have to worry about it. Like, it's not a thing that you have to concern yourself with. You get 15 more cards than usual, or 20 more cards than usual, so you just can rip through your deck as much as you want.
Yeah, I think that we very often like to say, if you're doing some kind of rules modification, kind of stick to one. Like, focus on the one change that makes sense. I think it's interesting, though, that there are a couple different changes happening here, but they all are kind of in support of the same goal of making this experience fun, and the fact that it's like, okay, well, we tested at 40 cards, there was this problem, let's actually make this additional change for a specific reason to address some problem with the gameplay. So all of these changes kind of fit together to create one core experience, so I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and frankly, Jane is an expert cube designer. When we give that advice, we're not giving that advice to the Janes of the world. The Janes of the world know they can do whatever they want. It's people that are wondering, I'm making my first rules-modified cube. Should I do this or not? If you're wondering, you shouldn't. Only do one. But Jane understands.
If you've passed the expert-level cube designer certification, then you're allowed.
If it existed, Jane would be triple certified for sure.
She would be the head of the certification board.
So I have to give a lot of credit to Keldon here, the organizer of Washington Cube Champs, the owner of the Bolt Cube, a.k.a. the Oinkinator. Keldon's a good friend, and we talked about this cube actually the day prior because Keldon was talking about his desire to draft it. And Keldon said, look, I think the cloud posts, or the loci, the cards that have the locus subtype, are just OP. They're the best strategy to be in. And he taught me through his reasoning, which was basically like, there are a lot of them in the cube. I should say, we mentioned that, the Citadel broke Singleton. There were far more cubes that were non-Singleton in this event than Singleton. I think it was like 2 of the 10 were actually true Singleton cubes, and the rest were breaking Singleton in some way, which I thought was awesome because that's like a preconception that so many people have that cubes have to be Singleton, and here was just on offer a smattering of cubes of completely different goals and strategies that all just happened to break Singleton in different ways, which was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I thought especially in the Citadel it was fun where it was just like, 2 Snapcaster Mages. Why? Because Snapcaster Mages,
because it rules.
There's no replacement for it.
So Jane has a lot of loci in this cube. I think at the time that I drafted it, it was like 6 or 7 cloud posts, as well as other posts. There were multiple Thespian stages, there were multiple Vesuvas, there were multiple deserted temples, all these lands that allow you to basically really maximize the cloud posts strategy. And for those that don't know, this is kind of a weird constructed deck that if you haven't played constructed, you probably don't know about because these show up in cubes very rarely, and they also don't really show up at all in Commander for the same reason. They're hard to work in Singleton. These are lands that the sort of namesake Cloud Post is a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for a generic mana for each loci you control, and it has the subtype loci. So, sorry, it's not you control, it's the entire battlefield.
It is
number of
symmetrical,
loci in play, which we'll get to. But if you untap and play a second Cloud Post, then your first one now taps for 2 because you have 2 in play, and then it just scales, right? You play a third, now you have 9 mana, now you have 16 mana after that when they have 4 that tap for 4. So it gets out of hand really quickly. And Keldon talked me through this and was like, look, you want to take lands anyway because it's a desert draft, so prioritizing lands early is like already a priority. And I should say, very few colored lands in this cube because you can always get colored mana out of your spheres. And something I really liked about this environment was that it really made you double take at a lot of cards. Like Jane includes a lot of cards that are like triple devotion, like green cards or black cards, and you're like, how am I ever going to cast that here? And then you realize like, oh, I'll just make 3 spheres the turn before, and then I'll cast whatever I want. Like you can actually cast any spell you want at any time, but the cube is so dedicated to being colorless that it doesn't feel like it's a color pie doesn't matter kind of situation. You're not just jamming the best cards because, you really want to get some kind of synergy with the sort of shtick, the whole idea that you're cycling through a bunch of spheres. But anyway, Keldon was like, you want to be taking lands highly anyway, and also if you can make substantially more mana than your opponent, you can do whatever you want, right? You can start cycling through your deck at, 2 mana turns into 1 mana and a card, right? Every time you crack a sphere. So you basically pay like 1 mana to draw through your deck, as many times as you want and find any win condition you have that you can dump a bunch of mana into. And I took this advice to heart. It made sense to me. I was like, that sounds like a cogent strategy. I first picked Nearby Planet, which is a land from the Space Uncycle. What was that one called again? Unspace.
How did my brain just lose that?
I don't know.
Impossible to say.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. Either way, it was
Unfinity.
Unfinity, thank you. Unfinity. It's a land that has every land subtype. So it's every Urza's land. It's an Urza's Tower, an Urza's Power Plant, an Urza's Mine. It's a loci. It's all the basic land types. It's every type that a land can be. And it comes into play tapped, and you got to pay 1 when it enters the battlefield or sacrifice it. I just took that first. I was looking at my pack, and there were no obvious power outliers. And I was like, okay, well, let's just try this thing that Keldon believes. And I took that first, and I took every card that either was a locust or could be a locust, so like a Vesuva or a Thespian stage, I took them over everything in the entire draft for 60 cards, and ended up with 12 lands that could be a locust in my 60 land deck, including I think I had 5 Cloud Posts, 5 of the 6 that were in the cube, or 5 of the 7 that were in the cube. And sure enough, my deck could just make just insane amounts of mana every single game by turn 3 or 4, no matter what. It was really kind of messed up. So I got to live the dream that Keldon described. I had weird win conditions in my deck. I won a bunch of games just by hard casting Darksteel Colossus, which is the 11 mana 11/11 with Trample and Indestructible.
That's pretty cool.
I won a lot of games by casting this Fireball, Invoke the Firemind, which can either be a fireball or a big card draw spell, and I was just using it as a fireball. I was playing cards like Pestermite to untap my Cloud Posts to make even more mana. So I had a clear strategy, which was just make a bunch of mana, burn through all these cards I don't care about, and then kill them with some big spell. Or I also had a couple of cards that allowed me to pay mana whenever I cycled a sphere, either when an artifact was cast or when an artifact was sacrificed to deal some amount of damage. And when you have 30 mana, you can just kill somebody with that pretty handily. So I did that in round 1. Very easily. My opponent was kind of laughing. They're like, yeah, we're not playing the same game. I'm going to play a 3-drop on turn 3.
I know the feeling.
I'm going to play a 3-drop on turn 3, and you're going to make 14 mana and do whatever you want. And then in round 2, I came up against Harrison from Seattle, who is a notorious Spike skilled cube player. I believe didn't lose a single match all weekend, ended up going undefeated. And that is a spoiler for our match. Harrison did win, only because Harrison was the only other player that had taken any Cloud Posts at the table.
It is symmetrical. So.
It is symmetrical. So we had a game. I have a screenshot here of this board state.
A screenshot,
not a screenshot.
You call it.
I have a photograph of this board state. This is the board state on Harrison's turn 3, where I have 2 Cloud Posts in play, Harrison has 2 Cloud Posts in play, and he's about to play a third. And that means that we each just have 9 mana on turn 3. No, I'm sorry. He'll have 15 mana on his turn 4
totally
when he untaps. And we actually had some close games still. He found his Fireball first in game 1. I had more mana, but I was churning through my deck and just couldn't find my Fireball fast enough. He happened to have Devil's Play and just got me first, with me fueling his Cloud Post. He had way fewer than me, I should say. I think said he had 4 in his deck, plus a couple of Deserted Temples, which could untap them. He got there first in game 1 because he drew his Devil's Play. Did I win in game 2? I don't know. I could look at the records up. But I ended up losing for sure the match in a game where he had an Encroaching Wastes, which is a really expensive wasteland. You got to pay 4 and tap it to destroy a land. But mana is nothing in this matchup. And just the fact that he also happened to draw some of his Cloud Posts, and he also drew a way to destroy one of mine, and I also drew a little Cloud Post light that game. I was just behind on mana, and then the game ran away with me. And then in match 3, it was kind of the same. I just kind of did things my opponent could not compete with on rate. And I think this is another great example of how every meta is different. I mean, Jane has drafted this cube a lot in her local play group and just said that nobody has ever gotten that many Cloud Posts before. Usually they're spread out because people do need to take lands, and they are lands. And so people will take them even if they're not in a Cloud Post strategy because they just need lands. And so when they're kind of spread out, or you might have 3 in your deck to get the occasional boost, they were okay. But in a very focused deck, it was definitely not the kind of gameplay I think Jane was looking forward to or wanted out of the cube, which, again, every meta is different. You can never know this until you put it in front of a different group of people. And I probably wouldn't have found this out or been on this strategy if not for the fact that Keldon was this is what I think is best. And I think Keldon was probably right.
Did that same thing play out throughout the drafts this weekend, or was that kind of an anomaly?
I don't believe so. I think partially because I don't believe Keldon got to draft it, first of all. So I don't think he got to put that strategy to the test. So I don't know if anybody else came in with my sort of level of commitment to, I think this might be the best strategy if I commit to it out of the gate and force it. Also, I think it was just kind of by chance that nobody else, except for Harrison, who was across the table from me, was even looking at Cloud Posts, right? They were just blind to them. So I was taking them super highly, picks 1 and 2 out of every pack, and then also getting past them pick 6 and 7. And in one case, I wheeled one even. And so I was yeah, there's one pack that had 2 of them. So I took one and wheeled the other, right? So I think it was an anomaly to some degree. This is we'll talk more about this idea of the meta and the best deck and how that can possibly shake out, because I have thoughts about my own cube that was played in this event as well. But yeah, suffice it to say, the way my deck played out was not Jane's vision, I think. And there may be some fewer loci in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting how we've definitely talked about the experience of drafting a cube for the first time and it not going like it's expected. But that can still happen many, many drafts into a cube, especially if you're putting it in front of a very different group of people.
Something else I have to say about this cube. I mean, I love this cube. I think it is brilliant. I cannot wait for the day that Jane has finished acquiring 500-some chromatic spheres to backsleeve every single card in the cube with it. So
how many is she at?
She said she's like a third of the way there. Not even.
I mean, that's pretty good. It's a lot of chromatic spheres.
It's a lot, but, So anyway, I can't wait for that day. It's going to be awesome when that actually happens. I know she's waiting until after CubeCon for that because CubeCon said she couldn't do that because they would be slightly different wear patterns and therefore kind of marked, which I get, but also, boo, boring. Anyway, I love this cube. I think it's brilliant. One of the things I love about this cube, among many things, is that there's a lot of cards that are included in there purely because Jane just wants you to see that card in a pack and laugh at it. And you can completely afford that because you can just play it face down as a chromatic sphere. And you're also forced to actually play it, which means you might cast it sometime, right? Like,
can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so Lord of the Pit is in here. This is not a Lord of the Pit cube, but Lord of the Pit is like a sick old card that Jane likes and has
more
sick
like
art.
Lord of the Ball Pit.
I mean, that's honestly a big part of the reason why.
The joke, right?
I think that's why it's there too, probably. There's also there's that weird book that's like Saprazian Empires, the fourth.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm saying that sincerely. I know what you're talking about.
You know the card I'm talking about. Matthew, this is a great example. You just write some random string of words in the cards mentioned thing, and Anthony will find the exact card.
The book that has Roman numerals. Oh, it's Sarpadian Empires, Volume 7.
There you go. That card she has a beautiful foil copy of, which, again, that card does not do anything en ray in this environment. You would never be casting it intentionally, but you have to put it in your deck because you're forced to play all the cards. I genuinely thought it was such a beautiful thing about that cube. There were like clearly, I don't know, a few dozen cards that like Jane knew you are never going to play this card here. It is just not good enough. It's in there because it's Lord of the Pit. It's a joke about the ball pit and it's a cool old card, or it's in here because it's just a funky old foil that I have. The Cauldra cycle is in there, which that actually might be closer to playable. I'm not sure, but 60 card singleton, one copy of each of the Cauldra pieces. They're probably not very good.
Magic is Richard Garfield intended, frankly.
So much of Jane's personality gets to come through because there's this huge release valve on how that personality might impact gameplay, which is just you can play them as spheres. So yeah, look at these dumb cards that Jane likes because we're forcing you to. I think it's great. I loved it.
Yeah, that's great. My third draft, I got put into Aqua's Vintage Cube, which is a very well-known cube. I'm sure a lot of listeners to this show have seen it. Everything is as, maximalist as possible. It's a little bit different, actually, than I think maybe the impression, like the typical Vintage Cube, especially the online Vintage Cube, in that it has a bunch of even more incredibly wacky stuff. So it has some conspiracies. I don't think any custom cards, but there's like a hero card, which is this
That's
really
basically
weird.
A custom card if it's a hero
It's
card,
close.
right?
I mean, those were some part of like some event during one of the Theros sets where like you would play against your champion at your local game store and you'd get to win this hero card, and it's just this like thing that functions as you start with this card that is of type hero in play. Seems busted, to be honest. And then everything is as foil and altered and has artist signatures. So I think so much about what is great about this cube and what people really enjoy about it is just that like artifact, sitting down and getting to see this huge variety of cards and alters. As we have talked about on the show, Vintage Cube is not necessarily our wheelhouse, so I was a little bit apprehensive of was I going to be able to draft a functional deck at all, but I first picked a Time Walk, felt pretty good about that. Some of my other early picks, I think, included Kitza and Orcish Bowmasters and some reanimation spells. So I ended up in actually a very focused, I think very focused, tell me if I'm wrong, blue-black reanimator deck. I had a difficult Psychic Frog pick where I had to pass an Underground Sea that I really needed, but I mean, Psychic Frog is like the premier card for this.
That was before you had the Watery Grave, I assume?
It was. So I was like,
you got
really
the Watery Grave, so it's
fingers
fine.
crossed I would get a shock land for the couple fetch lands that I already had. And then as far as like reanimation targets, I had Atraxa, Archon of Cruelty, and Triplicate Titan. And then I also had Emissary's Ploy, which is this conspiracy which allows you to cast creatures of some particular mana cost regardless of their colors, which meant I was playing an off-color Inti, which was basically just free. Seemed like a solid discard outlet and, maybe plan B if things aren't going well as far as my reanimation strategy. It also meant that my Soul Ring and my Mana Crypt that I had could just cast all of my creatures.
Turn 1 Psychic Frog, hold up.
Absolutely,
Turn 1 Psychic Frog, Inquisition of Kozilek, because your Psychic Frog only costs 2 generic.
I'll be honest, that didn't come up very much in games, but it seems insane and very busted to me, and I was excited about that aspect of this deck.
Yeah, you've asked me a couple of times if I think his deck is okay. And I have avoided answering because I don't. First of all, I don't know. I mean, that's first and second of all, I don't know. But
Great.
I will say that if you were to present this deck to me before telling me your record, I would think this is a very strong deck. Like you've got.
That's the question.
Your Force of Will looks kind of bad. You have very few blue cards to pitch to it. Also, Force of Despair is not a card I'm generally looking to main deck in a Vintage Cube. That's the other card that kind of jumps out at me. Otherwise, like you said, very, very focused. Reanimator deck with Flash. Atraxa Flash is messed up. Triplicate Titan Flash, less messed up, but still a thing. Archon of Cruelty Flash, a cool discard outlet that also, does some stuff along the way.
When you can back it up with a reanimation spell, like Flash Flash was a card I was excited to play in this deck.
Yeah, you have Reanimate, Death from Life Death, and Animate Dead.
And also Recurring Nightmare.
And Demonic Tutor. I think the deck looks very strong. You've got power in Soul Ring and Mana Crypt and Emissary's Play, which is better than power, and Time Walk. I think it's really like 2 or 3 cards that maybe look a little out of place, but not much. You must have won a bunch, right?
Absolutely. Well, so no, I did get to have like the most extreme classic Vintage Cube experience against my first opponent, which I apologize very much to Ryan. He was also a great opponent, but he started turn 1 with a green Mana Dork, and my turn 1 was land, Mox, Entomb, Reanimate, Archon, you sacrifice a creature, I draw a card, you discard a card, like all the Archon's ridiculous, and then do that again when it attacks next turn, so that match, I will be honest, was not particularly close. I just drew exactly what I needed and just had the really, really fast, explosive Reanimator turns, Reanimator starts, which, I mean, like we've said, Vintage Cube, not necessarily my favorite, but it is fun to do that every once in a while.
Sound off in the chat if you think Anthony should have Entombed and Reanimated Atraxa instead of Archon of Cruelty. I don't actually know.
Yeah, great question. I don't
actually know.
It seemed good when my opponent had a creature in play.
It does also gain you life back from the Reanimate, so
yeah, that is also true. Match 2, I played against Aqua, the owner of the cube, which is spooky. You don't want to see that. But Aqua's obviously also a great opponent. It was fun to see him, like, not only just play against him, but also he knows all the alters and like knows like stuff to point out about like, oh, check out this over here was altered by this player, and here's
tell you what the rules text of this card is, even though it's super
helpful
out,
because you can't read most of the rules text here. Also interesting, these games were much more back and forth. He had, what was he even playing? Like Boros, but had like all the really broken stuff, the enter the dungeon kind of stuff. Monarchy, I had a explosive start where I was getting my Archon of Cruelty out, but then he had Palace Jailer to remove it, and we had some interesting back and forth. There's also some moments of just like, okay, now I'm going to roll Comet Stellar Pup 3 times, and we'll see if you can beat that. And almost, like I really felt like I carefully threaded the needle, and then he was like, okay, well, you're at 6. Here's Flage. If I draw a mountain next turn, you're dead. And he drew a mountain, which was very clever. Good strategy. Mm-hmm. So, interesting match 2. My third match, I will be honest, my deck just didn't function. It's like I was riding my bicycle and the chain just popped off, and I'm just like, what's going on? I'm turning the wheels, but it's not working. I was playing against DSB, which is, he's great to play with, great to see him, and it was 2 things. My deck didn't function, and also I played badly. I didn't figure out,
get me mad every time.
I didn't figure out, okay, I'm not drawing the combination of reanimation spells and ways to get things in the graveyard. What's my plan B? And he played a True Name Nemesis, and I just kind of folded to it. And then, I don't know, game 2, I wish I could explain what happened, but the deck just didn't really work, which, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that means it's a bad deck. I think it still looks like a very focused and good deck to me. I'd be curious to see what's in your sideboard, because again, the force with 5 things to pitch to it when one of them is your best reanimation target feels kind of rough.
I mean, that's really one of the mistakes that I made. I kept a difficult hand that had both Chrome Mox and Force of Will in it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to lose some of these cards, and figuring out
most of them.
figuring out how to navigate that was difficult, and it's like, honestly, the Time Walk didn't matter, or I needed to use the forced discarding Atraxa to counter the True Name Nemesis. And it's like, that felt so bad. And I thought I would find some other way to deal with the True Name Nemesis. But if I thought about it, I would have realized, no, I just need to get rid of that and then put
you're
pressure.
One way in your deck is Archon, I believe.
Yeah, and then just put pressure with my big Rotting Regisaur. And that might have still been a game. I'm not confident. Because also he did something that meant that he was going to get a second True Name Nemesis 4 turns down the line, because
what is that?
I don't know, dude.
Suspended a clone?
Exactly, yeah. Whenever he casts something, the second thing every turn, he also gets a suspended copy of it.
Wild.
So that was my Vintage Cube experience.
You Vintage Cubed. And then we were at the end of the weekend, and you and I both put our fingers on the scales a little bit, because there weren't that many cubes there, and so I was happy to play all of them except for the ones I knew already, basically. But I did secretly really want to play DSB's cube, Cabbages, and Kings quite badly. And so we both, for the first time, ranked a cube, Cabbages and Kings, and we got assigned into it, of course. This is a cube that is meant to tell a story about the class conflict between rich aristocrats and the working class, I guess.
Working class goblins.
And the way this manifests in the cube design is that every single card in the cube that is 4 mana value and below has to be an old school card. Has to be a card printed before the modern card frame. Can't be from a supplemental set. It's like old school Magic, which is DSB's allegory for, the honest working class, the Cabbages, basically. And then everything 5 mana value and above, with like 1 or 2 kind of weird exceptions. Like Siege Gang Commander, for example, is included here as a king, even though it's actually an old school card. But for the most part...
But it's a new bordered.
He did make it a new bordered version. Everything 5 mana value and above is new cards in the new modern border. And also, I would say, generally speaking... what some might call egregious card design, where it's just like a huge creature with upside and
also some more upside.
And upside on top of the upside. And when you X, do Y. When you Y, do Z. Like, just kind of that sort of design. And it's meant to sort of tell the story of the tension between these two eras of Magic, these two approaches to designing Magic cards, and also this sort of, story about Cabbages and Kings. DSB did a great little speech and song, which I caught like the last 85% of on video.
Shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings. Yeah. And while the sea is boiling hot and weather pigs have wings, glue, clay, no work today. Cabbages and kings. Good luck.
Woo! Which I think is emblematic of this cube. And then I want to hear how your draft went.
My draft went interesting. I was actually talking to DSB and Joe, who also has a fair amount of experience with this. This is Joe Donkey from Idaho. And they were like, okay, here's 2 things that we think are really good. One is goblins, especially with like Muxus at the top end and Recruiter. Goblins are very strong.
Big agree.
Also, if you can just get a bunch of the green rampy guys and ramp into a bunch of kings, that's also been pretty strong. So my pack 1, pick 1, I took a goblin and was excited to just hard force goblins. There weren't that many goblins in the next couple of packs.
You were upstream of Joe Anderson,
and
too.
I also looked to my left and saw, oh God, there's Joe Anderson here.
But you were upstream of him.
I know,
you had the
but
chance. I was 1 seat downstream of him.
I still felt conflicted.
I thought goblins were the best thing, but I was like, but I know Joe is going to force it. There's no question in my mind.
Yeah.
So even though I thought from the sort of scuttlebutt throughout the weekend that goblins were the best thing, I ended up not forcing because of my proximity to Joe Anderson.
So I ended up in green, taking a bunch of these, Findhorn Elves, Birds of Paradise, Quirion Elves, Heartwarden, all these kinds of things that would ramp me into playing some Kings. White felt very open, and I got some pretty late. I think Io the Dawnstar was my first kind of egregious thing that I was like, White seems pretty open. I don't know if I should be getting this 4th or 5th pick. Season of the Burrow, Regal Caracal, make a bunch of cats. They're all huge. You get lifelink. And this Canopy Gargantuan, which just like doubles the power of all your creatures every turn, and also
7 mana
flying.
Green Dragon, yeah.
I splashed Natali Primal Storm. Let's not interrogate that decision.
I had to look at that one. That one's very similar to an Natali, which is so much stronger, and the art looks very similar. And I was like, "Is this the really strong Natali?" And I read it a couple times.
This one's also very strong.
I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the other one.
Okay, fair.
For what it's worth.
And I had Battle Screech, which I love to play Battle Screech. Green-white. Played a bunch of Grixis this weekend. Bookending it with green-white feels good.
Our decks were not that different, except I said color is an illusion. I will play whatever colors I want. My first pick was Siege Gang Commander, which was convenient because I was like, well, this is one of the best Goblins cards.
Mm-hmm. And then did you look to your right and see Joe Anderson?
Well, I looked to my right and saw Joe Anderson, and also I was like, I got past Kenrith Returned King, which I know to be one of the best cards, period.
It's got King right in the name.
A lot of the inclusions here are definitely also flavorful. Like,
for sure,
are cards that are all about the aristocracy that are included among the kings. No, my first 5 picks really tell the story of this draft. Siege Gang Commander, Kenrith Returned King, Selesnya Bounce Land, Is It Bounce Land, Reflecting Pool. I will cast spells of any color, and I will just try and basically be a 5-color Kings control deck. And the Kings I ended up with were the aforementioned Siege Gang Commander and Kenrith the Return King. I also had Backdraft Hellkite, Consecrated Sphinx, Season of Weaving, and Obika Enigma Goliath, which is some weird commander card I've never seen before, but it does when you XY and then great stuff happens. Lots of upside. I think my deck was very strong, actually. I ended up losing in the finals to Joe on the mono red deck, which I do think is the best thing to be doing here, especially if it's open. And I had a really strong control suite, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like 8 removal spells, and then 2 board wipes. Kind of 3 board wipes. Breath of Dwargoz is also kind of a board wipe. We have really strong control suite. Not as much card advantage as I would like. There's not a lot of just like draw a card in this cube. It's kind of like you draw what you draw and you like enjoy it and just play it.
Draw what you draw and be happy.
And be happy about it. And then I had some other like random sort of chaff at the sort of low end to just like jump block or trade in combat, like a Wild Mongrel and a Mana War to buy time. But I was really just waiting to cast my 5, 6, 7 drop to take over the game, which worked a treat in my first 2 rounds. And then I knew that I had basically no chance against Joe Anderson. And it was not because I think, mono red is just that much better than the 5-color Kings deck in this cube. It was because I knew Joe Anderson had 2 cards I absolutely could not beat. And those cards were Blood Moon and Sulfuric Vortex.
Ooh, Blood Moon's rough.
My mana base was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bounce lands. I ended up with 6 of the bounce lands, and then, 4 more other non-basic lands. So if he plays Blood Moon, I can cast, 7 of the spells in my deck that happen to be mono red, and they are not going to be enough to win the game. So that's just going to be game over. I also can't beat Sulfuric Vortex because I have exactly one answer to it, and it's Vindicate, and I guess I could Vindicate it if I get lucky, but probably I won't have the Vindicate the games he has Sulfuric Vortex, just,
And you're going to be under pressure in the meantime.
And my deck is not fast, and the fact that it gets rid of the life gain, which it did have a little bit of, just meant that I did not have an answer to Sulfuric Vortex either. So the other thing I knew Joe Anderson had was a couple of ways to remove lands, though not the best ones. I had Strip Mine in my pool. I had Vindicate in my pool. I had some of the best ways to deal with lands, which this is where I want to talk about sort of the design ethos of this cube, because my deck did really well in the first 2 matches, and they were like close games too. It wasn't like it was a blowout. It was like good magic, I thought, back and forth. My third match was not close at all. Joe beat me in like a total of, I think, 5 minutes in 2 games, and it was because he played these cards I couldn't beat, and I just lost. And DSD was watching over my shoulder, and like, afterwards just like, I feel so bad, man. And I'm like, why do you feel bad? This is exactly what you want.
What you wanted.
This is the story you wanted to tell, right? Like, this cube includes mana fixing like the bounce lands. It includes things that are at 5 mana and above that you really want to be playing because they're so much more powerful than the other options in terms of the individual card value. And then it includes ways to punish you for trying to do that. There is a lot of land destruction in this cube that has bounce lands. And so Joe removed one of my bounce lands in one of our games, and I'm like, bye-bye. Like, I'm now down 2 mana, and you're the aggro deck, and so it's now going to be at least 2 more turns before I get to 5 mana to cast my Backdraft Hellkite, and by then you will have had 2 more turns to deal damage to me. So I got fully punished in exactly the way that I expect this cube would want to punish me, right? I'm trying to play these expensive spells. I'm playing 5 colors. I'm being greedy as hell, and I got punished by the cards that are in there to punish greed. And in that sense, I thought the cube was very successful in that it told the story that DSB wants the cube to tell in a way that was very compelling and played out exactly as predicted. So I was like totally fine with that. I was not salty at all. I was like, I knew I couldn't beat that deck, and that's just how the cookie crumbles. If I draft 5-color Kings, I should hope to dodge mono red punish Kings deck, and I did not. So that's how it played out for me. But I truly felt fine about that. I was like, this was cool. I kind of liked that you're doing these things. I think a lot of other cube designers are like considered just bad design. Like, you shouldn't put land destruction in cubes with bounce lands, or you shouldn't play huge 5 mana haymakers, alongside like dinky little 1/1 goblins for 1, right? And these cards are not compatible in the same environment. And I think DSP proved that they are. And it's like this whole package of his little deck full of, like, frankly, pretty bad 1-mana goblins, like not the premier ones, like really dinky ones that Joe didn't even know what their abilities were. He's like, I don't know what this can do, but it's
it's a
1-mana 1/1 goblin. I'm going to attack you for 1 repeatedly. That's what mattered. And those in combination with never letting me cast my 5-drops because of the land destruction and the Blood Moons, that won. And so it works holistically as a package, even though a lot of the individual decisions I think people might say is like, quote-unquote, bad cube design, which was delightful to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a pretty similar experience. My first round I played against Dayton, who was also drafting a green deck. She did a really cool thing where there's a creature that if you block it, you have to put your blocking creatures back on top of your library, and she put the lure listed on it, so it's like, okay, you have to block with your whole board, and then they all go back on your library.
Yeah, you said, do you want? You don't get to choose.
You don't get to choose.
It doesn't matter what you want.
You do have a choice. You can concede at any time.
That's true.
And so I'm like, well, I can play out my huge 7-drop, but then I'm just going to have to put it back on top of my library, and then I know I'm never drawing anything that is interactive that can remove that, because all my creatures are going to be on top of my library.
Does it happen before combat damage is dealt?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
At least it was an old card. Maybe Oracle text has been updated, but as far as I can tell,
a lot of those old cards that care about that kind of stuff tend to be like, at the end of combat, then you do this stuff. Maybe, I'm not sure.
They don't expect you to put, Tempting listed, or...
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
So that was cool. I did win that match 2-1. I think that, I was just like able to do big stuff quicker enough. She was also trying to get like Dread into play, this like huge thing that whenever you deal damage to your opponent, you have to sacrifice all your creatures. But my Gargantuan was big enough. Match 2, I played against Joe, and it was a really similar story. I had like what I thought was a really great hand for the first game, played 2 dorks, had a bounce land, and I was set up to play my Atali Primal Storm on turn 4, and then he Divided Burn spell, kills both my dorks, and then uses Dwarven Blastmaster, which is one of those aforementioned goblins that just blows up my bounce land.
Well, he's a dwarf, not a goblin, let's be real.
Yeah, but it
goblin
doesn't matter. He's a
little red guy.
Goblinoid. And I'm just like, well, that's the most punishing thing you could do. Like, now you've killed 3 of my cards and my mana, and now all the rest of my hand is uncastable, so good on me.
That's what you get for trying to play kings, like
absolutely.
Atali.
Game 2 is a little bit more of a game because I had Battle Screech, which I'm always delighted to draft Battle Screech in a cube, and that's a really good card here that can trade with a bunch of little guys, but then I couldn't beat the Sulfuric Vortex that came after it, so pretty similar to your story. Final round played against Heather again, so not only was I bookmarking my cube experience with playing green-white, I was also bookmarking it starting and ending playing against Heather, who in both of these matches was doing something weird with Goblin Trenches, which was kind of fun to see. We played a really interesting first grindy game, and by interesting I mean it was something. She played
Heather drafted a stacks deck, full-on dedicated stacks deck.
She played a Peacekeeper, which just is a little creature. It's a 1/1 that says creatures can't attack, and I was like, well,
why didn't you draft 8 removal spells, Anthony, like me?
I'm doubling the number of counters on all of my creatures every single turn, and yet I don't know if I have a way to kill your Peacekeeper to prevent myself from decking first.
Sometimes I really think that if you and I could like do a, Dragon Ball Z mind meld fusion dance, we could be the most powerful drafter, because I feel like you always end up with not enough removal, and I always end up with too much removal. You're like, I have 1 way to remove Peacekeeper, and I'm like, my opponent plays like a 3-mana 2/2, and I'm like, I guess I got to use a removal spell on that because I have no blockers, so I guess I'm going to have to remove that.
I don't know if that's always true. I feel like sometimes I do a better job of that. I did end up having one answer, which was very close to the bottom of my deck, but eventually it's like, okay, I cast this Season of the Burrow, which has one of the modes is destroy target permanent, and I was sure she would have a counter spell, but she didn't, and so we're just like, okay, cool. It doesn't matter. Like, you kill me for 5 billion. It doesn't matter at this point. And then we played just 2. Yeah, I got it into... The second match was maybe a little bit more interesting, where she got out the smokestack, and I didn't have any clean answer to it, but got really lucky in having being able to cast and flashback Battle Screech on like just the turn that I needed it to be able to have stuff to sacrifice. And then again,
the classic smokestack play pattern of actually my opponent's deck is accidentally a better smokestack deck than mine all of a sudden.
And then I had the Season of the Burrow again to get rid of that, and then was able to sort of pull ahead pretty quickly from there. But interesting matches. I had a good time with this cube overall.
I had a great time with all the cubes. I think that, no disrespect to any other cube event organizers, including our own local Max, who included all local cubes. I thought the cubes on offer in this event was the best menu of cubes I've seen in terms of like diversity and range. And like I said, just almost all breaking singleton and like doing things that you wouldn't expect that allowed for a really sort of great variety and diversity of different types of drafted environments that I really appreciated as a player. Like, it is rare that I look at a menu of cubes and say, I'm happy to play any of these. Like, that pretty much never happens. I'm usually like exclude, and that wasn't really happening here. So, big fan of that. Jane also did, I think, a really good job focusing on the fun in the event and kind of trying to weed out any, competitive nonsense that would like detract from the fun. So, Jane had Gwen just disable the standings page on the Hedron Network instance, so you couldn't see who was winning and what the records were, which... Great, who cares? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I definitely didn't care at all.
I know you wanted a pin. We all wanted a pin, but there was no like sort of sense of that. Nobody was competing for top 8. There was no cut to top 8. It was just 4 drafts over the course of the weekend. And then also there was a bunch of prizes given out for things that were not winning at Magic. Like I said, you won the prize for traveling the furthest to the event. There was also a like custom card design thing going on the side all the time where you could like design a little custom card. I love creative
side activities for a cube event.
Yeah, so there were like awards and honorable mentions given out for that. There was awards given to the person. There was one person that lost every single match all weekend and yet played all however many 12 matches there were. And so that person got a trophy. There was a little voting box for the person that was the most pleasant opponent, which the aforementioned person, Ariel, won, and so glad to see that Ariel won that prize. Just awesome sort of end of the event. I say this all the time, but these events are great. This is one of the most fun I've ever had at any of these events, and I'm really glad we made the trip, even though it involved flying across the country.
Not a bad trip, although.
No,
I got a lot of reading done, which is great.
Yeah, our flights were fine. We can't really complain about that because travel's been crazy for people lately. And we just had one tiny itty-bitty delay. So, lucky ducks. That is the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. If you want to support the show on Patreon, you can find a link to the Patreon in the show notes. I'm very happy to say I just sent the first email today to who I hope will be the first recipient of some money from the Cube Fellowship to attend a local Cube event.
Incredible that happened so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if it ends up happening. Obviously, they have to respond and sorts of details out.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the Patreon was funded enough to support that so quickly.
That is amazing, for sure. If you don't know, so we use most of the Patreon money to fund editing this show, so that pays our editor, Matthew. Shout out to Matthew in the booth. But we're using any excess funds we have to do two things. One is try and basically subsidize people to attend local Cube events that otherwise couldn't afford it and that we believe to be exemplary members of the community, the kinds of people we want at these Cube events. And I sent the first email today to possibly award somebody that. And I also gave Parker the big thumbs up green light to start reaching out to writers to contribute to the site and pay them for their time. So
super exciting.
Parker's also going to be doing that in his spare time as he's traveling the world and jet setting around. Yeah, if you want to support any of that, check out the link into the Patreon in the show notes. It also gets you access to our bonus podcast, Magic Doesn't Exist, where Anthony and I talk about whatever we want, as long as it has nothing to do with magic, as well as the Discord and other stuff. Whatever. All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast is produced by thinking really hard about Magic cards and then speaking into microphones about it. Anthony, thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you for flying all the way across the country with me to play even more Magic.
Toot toot.